occurred, there was a great assumption that this would be very difficult for the Democrats because it tore them apart. You remember Johnson came in and said he talked to a right-wing Democrat and a left-wing Democrat, Bill White and Lou Harris. Most of this really ripped the Democrats up. That is true only if the issue is kept in there grinding. The Democrats' strategy, obviously, is to cool it. Johnson doesn't say that damn word, although he's personally furious. And so you allow what we've done here is to play this in such a way, Muskie and Humphrey and all the rest crawl off the war issue. They don't allow, they aren't reminded of the fact that they took changed their position on it. They aren't reminded of the terrible Democratic record and so forth in this issue. Now, how this is handled, how to get that issue, the Pentagon paper, up front and center again is difficult. If it goes to the Congress, John feels that, that we could control it. I mean, and in terms of keeping it in the court, it won't come out until after the election, which is too late to do us any good. I mean, you know what I mean? You just go to the judicial process, is it Ellsberg or Gell or something else? The main thing about this is to keep it open through, keep it a running sword through a lot of leagues, columns, et cetera, all the damn thing, to keep going about. But what I think we see at the present time is that we're at an impasse. I think a lot of work is being done. I mean, they're investigating, the FBI is investigating, they're investigating here. We got a lot of information and the rest. But I think we may just be doing it too damn legalistically. Now, again, let's look at our opponents and look at ourselves. It's in their interest to forget the Pentagon papers, and they're trying desperately to forget it. It's in our interest to have that issue front and center. There's only one weakness we have here, which we have to have in mind, or one vulnerability, and that is that Henry is deeply involved. Not from the standpoint of criminality, guilt, but from the standpoint that virtually every one of these people that are involved in stealing the papers and publishing them were either students of his or associates of his and so forth. And in the event that, well, that's why Richardson and Elliot Richardson is involved. That is why a congressional hearing would be very difficult.
Are we talking about, Mr. President, the contents of the papers or the machination or just spreading them around?
Spreading, well, the difficulty is, first let's talk about the congressional hearing. The reason that we cannot allow or encourage a congressional hearing is that the congressional hearing starts down a smart counsel. You'll call Richardson and you'll call Henry. Because Henry's so deeply involved, and we can't allow that to happen.
Well, I get back to the point. I'm not quite clear whether you're talking about the contents of the Pentagon papers or the way they were leaked out of the government. The hearings, Mr. President.
Anyway, I'm not sure about the contents or the way that we've done the governments. I don't think people care. The main thing is to keep it stuck into the Democrats so that they squabble about it. You see what I mean? But
they don't want to bring that up. They originally asked for $250,000 in the Senate. Then they cut that back to $100,000. Fulbright took the $100,000 and hired 3 staff inspectors. And told them to do a staff study. And had an executive committee of the Foreign Relations this week and said, we don't really want to get into public hearings. Now, just 2 months ago, he and Mansfield were preaching the biggest congressional expose ever of how we get into Vietnam. They've turned that right off because the politics, we have inclined to that. The politics are terribly destructive of a lot of guys who are presently advising Muskie and the Democratic foreign policy establishment is going to look just as bad as hell.
There is one way to get high visibility to the whole circumstance again, and that would be to go after the newspaper men. And then that would rehash the whole First Amendment thing.
Yeah, but that's a different losing proposition.
Well, it is a very high visibility item now, and we've still got that to use if you wish. only way to really open up the contents of the Pentagon Papers themselves is with the assassination and some of those really juicy things that are highly attractive and where we can get some inside information and get a controversy going. Was big men implicated? Was John Paul Van implicated? Who is John Paul Van? Who are these shadowy figures? What did Averill Harriman say? What was Lodge's role? And there's a Sunday supplement series in that could be pretty juicy.
What you really need to let out are some of the underlying cables and documents that John and Steve are studying that look pretty good around the coup period.
Somebody's hand.
We never.
Boston Globe must have based their story on something. Remember, they had the story about the coup.
We never have found out exactly what the Times has, for sure. This is something where you're not going to be able to calculate who's going to get hit by the shrapnel. There's a lot of this stuff that splatters all over once you open this up. Well, now there's another front that we can begin to exploit that doesn't have to wait for the elections, and that's the whole Bay of Pigs business and the Cuban Missile Crisis era. And we are starting now to review those documents to pick out the ones that should be floated out. God, there's a ton of paper in this crazy thing. Just the physical process of getting through. We know where it is. We've got a guy in place going through it, but it's like swimming out the ocean. It's a life's work. And to get 100 people who are sufficiently attuned and loyal to know what they're looking at to go through this stuff is nearly impossible. So it's a monumental task to get back into this old stuff.
One caveat there. Let's not get into a missile cap question that come out of this.
Well,
I'm not talking about the 60 missile cap.
Yeah, I understand.
Getting back to the Pentagon thing, Henry's concern obviously is he knows that a lot of his name runs in and out of these files too. That's one. The other concern, however, is more legitimate one. Probably is that just having discussion about the war now we get in is not helpful. Now that's on the one side. On the other side, it's very much to our interest to have our Democratic friends deeply involved. When you have a Mansfield who's, supposed to be a fine gentleman, the rest finally, coming up, calling this Nixon's war, show you how this has to be fought. That's the problem we've got here. We've got all these people who are involved in this. They're all, in one way or another, either involved in the assassination of Vienna, and after that they're involved in supporting the war, and after that they're involved in sabotaging our air standard. And and we just don't have anybody worth a damn fighting on our side of it. I just have to go to bat all the time myself.
Can we get somebody that could devote full-time to this project that's knowledgeable?
Yes,
we have that.
We do have, John. And I've got Bud Krogh and Dave Young virtually full-time on this with 3 other people.
Well, we just can't let them get away with this. That's the point. That is there. It's there completely. I mean, the Pentagon Papers are about their administration. That is why it's to our interest to put the war in their administration. Let them argue about that.
John, what I was talking about is somebody that's on our side, 100% is knowledgeable about foreign affairs, that devotes full time to this thing and has a little bit of the dirty tricks to tell you.
David Young.
Well, Young is off the NSC staff and knows where all the bodies are buried in that group. And it is, I think as far as an understanding of what actually has gone on there, I think he's in possession of that.
I have thought in our own mind, let's suppose you do have a controversy about the Democrats and so forth. What does that do?
Well, on the negative side, it exposes the CIA.
Right.
And the inference will be drawn that that wasn't just the CIA in former administrations, but that's sort of typical of the way they still operate.
And since it's already broken the Boston Globe, I mean, I think just already that we follow it. Now, I don't think Henry was around. I mean, he may have written an article or something about that thing about it, but I hope he didn't. But the hell with it, if he did, that's too bad. I didn't
See any sign of it?
I didn't. I've always been highly critical of the hand affair. And my record is clear. And also, the press is highly, is very much afraid of that affair themselves. I mean, even though Lister asked the question that I answered on that, he can play it up. I mean, because he knows goddamn well it's true. Murder at Vienna triggered the whole business because all the press was for the murder at Vienna. But it did trigger the whole business. And if you notice how they just stepped over that quickly,
Especially the liberal press, the New York Times, just repressing about the repressive ZM regime.
that's right. But the liberal press, believe me, don't want to have the Vienna incident brought up. When we get to how we got into the war, two incidents that really brought us in. One, the State Department scared us into the top. One is the Laotian Agreement, which Herring negotiated, the partition of Laos, and the second is the Vienna incident. The Laotian Agreement opened up the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but the Vienna incident started the rear of the coups and so forth, and the instability which inevitably led to our involvement. Now, on both of those, our opponents are terribly vulnerable. Another thing about it, hitting the Vienna incident, is that it allowed Johnson to be on our side on this. You see, the Pentagon Papers were primarily played up by the liberal press as pissing on Johnson, not on Kennedy. And frankly, there's not much in it for us to kick Johnson around. Right? But there's a hell of a lot of it in it for us to kick the guy, which is really the truth. And Johnson, with good reason, constantly points out the fact that he didn't start the war in Vietnam, Kennedy did. And he's right. He is totally right. Kennedy did. Kennedy screwed it up.
Very few people in public recognize that. They hear it talked about.
So I believe that's what it, now, I can hear Henry's arguments now. I guess he would say, well, stir up the situation in South Vietnam about murder, this and that and the other thing. I'm not so sure it's going to make all that difference. The election's over. Look, I predicted that they would not use it. You recall I did that, but they won't use this. I was sure, man. The liberal press is, they don't want that Vienna incident talked about.
How about a senator charging that the CIA is holding Khomeini under wraps, and then our coming forward and saying, no, that's contrary to our policy. He's free to talk.
It would be very good.
And then all of a sudden he's available.
Don't release him right away, hold it up for a little while.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Well, we can crash around and make them want it.
They get a big freedom of the press.
Yeah. Hell, we would have a blueprint to do it.
That is bothering me. That's how we owe Helms nothing. He owes us everything. We kept him on. And we're going to let the CIA take a whipping on this. I doesn't bother me a bit, and I'm not going to hear that argument from Henry or anybody else. This Vienna incident's got to get out, and it's just got to get out.
Well, let's take the next 2 weeks to dig into this.
Well,
Get everything in place.
by way of foundation. Yeah, by way of foundation, obviously, we want everything that we can get out of the CIA before we break it off in it.
Sure.
So we'll turn our guys loose.
Well, let me say first, I want the story of the end thing, everything story. I intend to have it on the DM incident. Now, I hope that the press conference, you say, nonsense, you just get to work and get it for us.
There's some CIA stuff on the Bay of Pigs, apparently, that they will die first before they will give us, I understand. Yeah. Well, there's also some other stuff, some internal stuff over there that we know about, but getting to it is like that big black rock in Mecca, you know.
Oh, we've got to get Walters in there.
If we could just get a friend in the hierarchy over there who would let us in, some cushion.
I consider the top priority. I want the DM story. And also on the Bay of Pigs thing, I want an order to go to Cushman, to Helms and Cushman, that for my purposes, not for public release, I have to have the Bay of Pigs story. Now that's an order. And I expect it in 1 week, or I want his resignation on my desk. Put it as coldly as that. The Bay of Pigs story, the total story. I know a lot about it myself, but I've got to have it for my, just because I will be questioned about it, and I want to be able to know what to say. The Bay of Pigs story and the DM story. Well, let me say that I am really distressed about the failure. I put this request in 2 years ago that I wanted a story on those 3 items, the bombing hole, the Bay of Pigs, the DM, Henry Stock has utterly failed on it. And I want you to tell Hague today that they're out of it now. Forget it. But goddamn, I'm going to have those on my desk. And I want it readable, concise form. Those 3 incidents. Is that clear?
Yes, sir, but I'd like, rather than to get the concise form, let us concise it for you after we get the raw material.
I don't want it done by Henry Stock.
Yeah, well, no, or the CIA either. I'd like to just get the bulk stuff over from the CIA, and we'll assemble it for you in proper order.
Right, then don't tip them off, then.
Just get the wholesale.
Get the material.
Yes, or concise form, you give the excuse not to give it.
That's right.
That's right.
Now, this is going to...
All the material available on the Bay. I've got to have it all. I've got to have it all. We're going to get the facts. Well, then we're entitled to the facts. And John, this is, I consider the highest priority. Any son of a bitch you can in there to help on it. All right. Dick Allen, Hughes, Shorten, anyone. Roughest, sophisticated people have got to work on the machine. They've got to know something about it. I mean, your difficulty, you see, with thinking Krog on it is it's awful hard to take even a fellow as able as he is and start out in this field, and he won't know what he's reading. Now, whatever Houston is, he's of course, an untrustworthy fellow in many ways, but he does know what the hell they're doing. So does Dick Allen.
Yeah. Alan's got a brother that's apparently pretty good, too.
You got to put somebody that knows what he's reading.
Where's Dick Allen?
He works for Pete Peters. Pete Peters, that's right. And he's here, you can use it 8 hours a day.
I will.
Well, I would throw him into the deal, because he'll have a great follow. Working with the Krog would be excellent, because he'll immediately understand the significance of things.
Well, we've got a couple of fellows under Krog, Liddy and Hunt, who know what they're doing, and they've been around. And so we can turn them onto this, too.
I think now we're ready, and I think the thing I've got to emphasize to all people is that, remember, time's running out.
Right.
We've got, and I think just put the pour on the coal right now. You can't keep saying, well, we'll have an excuse next week, well, maybe there's going to be a summit or some goddamn thing. But forget it. I want to do it. We're going to do it. And I want it for myself in any event. I want to be able to know what the facts are. And I got to be able to write about it if I want to at some point. On these issues in which I'm dealing